Social Security, they're screwing you. I want to thank our sponsors, Francis Marion University, Carolina Bank, Micky Finn's, Victor's, Marlboro MPD Electric Co-op, McCall Farms, Pepsi, Florence PLC Commercial Real Estate, and McLeod Health. I'm not a ready kind of guy. I'm not one that reads notes. I'm not one that writes speeches. I do ramble a bit. Let me back up. I ramble a lot. I ramble a lot incoherently at times and fairly coherently at other times. But when I look down at my book, I want to make sure I'm thanking our sponsors properly, because none of this is possible without the generous support of these very community-minded sponsors, and we certainly do appreciate it. So the tease, I guess, with Social Security, they're screwing you. I get accused a lot of being an America Firster, but lacking some substance to this very emotional and populist-driven political movement. We are in a very chaotic political time. There's no denying that. We are in a very consequential political time. I believe sincerely the duopoly, the Republicans and Democrats, have lost the faith and trust of the American people. I didn't say one or the other. I said they both have, in a crazy kind of way, kind of helped one another along in losing the faith of the American people, losing the trust of the American people. I tend to lean right, so I blame the Democrats more than I will the Republicans. I certainly respect those who lean to the other side, who believe the Republicans are more guilty. But there's no denying, if you're not naive, if you're not gullible, if you're not being paid by one party or another, there's no denying the reality that the duopoly that has dominated American politics for the last, I guess, since I don't want to say since the Civil War, since the New Deal. I guess the New Deal would be a line of demarcation that we could say pre-New Deal, post-New Deal. The Republicans and Democrats have basically ran the joint. One has had control at periods of time. The other's had control in other periods of times. And once the duopoly lost the moral authority, it was inevitable that I don't know, some other sort of political candidate would rise. He would garner a degree of support. That would upset the apple cart, so to speak, create this chaotic and very consequential political time we're living in. But I do get accused of being a diehard, true believing America Firster, but lacking any coherent, substantive political initiatives or policies. So I want to try to add a little intellectual underpinning to this America First movement, because when I'm challenged about, okay, Ken, I get it. I kind of go along with you that maybe the duopoly has lost its way. Maybe they don't represent the voters, but rather the donors and special interest. But if you're a Trump voter, if you identify as an America Firster, what is some of the policy initiatives that you think do coalesce or reward some of the coalescing of the working class vote? But because I believe sincerely that when you look at the polls, you look at some of the exit polls, look at some of the analytics within the polls, that there's probably going to be 10 or 12% of Republican voters who will never come around to Trump. I mean, for whatever reason. Some of it is they've been very well fed at the trough of government. Others, they like reverent candidates, respectful candidates, decorum. They believe presidents should behave a certain way. There's a multitude of reasons that a lot of Republicans are not going to support Donald Trump as the eventual and inevitable nominee. But I think you can help the cause by presenting some sort of America First initiative that includes policy, that includes substance, that is not raw populism in its truest and most inhibited form, but rather what would government do if America Firsters were in charge? And it goes back to my original comment, Social Security, they're screwing you. The average Social Security check in America today is somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,700. It's CPI indexed. I mean, it's based on inflation. Social Security recipients got a pretty good bump during the COVID inflation era that we're still dealing with. Chicken sandwich, fries, and a drink cost you $13 or $14. I mean, that's Bidenomics. That's macroeconomic stimulus. But once again, the duopoly is largely responsible for the amount of inflation the average American is dealing with. So we all work an entire working life. We get to a certain age. Some have plenty of money, don't worry much about Social Security. The majority don't. It's a big part of their post-work life, and they basically need X number of dollars coming in the door to keep their boat afloat, to crack their nut, to live a life. However, they've chosen to live life. And I'm not one of these class warfarists. I mean, wealthy people should do more than poor people. I mean, they've got more money. It takes money to do fun things in life. I don't think poor people should be offended that the wealthy have ended up on the good side of finance. But one of the things that I believe empower the American working class is some degree of financial liberation, some degree of financial security, some degree of financial independence. And I think reforming Social Security away from this kind of Ponzi scheme model, money in, money out. And I don't want to go into details. This is not about more workers paying, fewer workers paying in, more workers receiving the benefit. It's not about 10,000 people in America today turning 65, the gigantic baby boomer population beginning to end their work life, expecting a residual benefit from the federal government. This is more about what could we do moving forward and what would be best for the American working class that largely identify as America Firsters. You've got a conservative ideology, a liberal ideology, and then you've got an American working class that kind of just says, hey, man, I want to be able to make a good go of it. I want to have a little bit of money in the bank. I want to be able to send my kid to college without going bankrupt. I want to afford a mortgage. I want to buy a car every 4 or 5 years. I don't want to die broke. I don't want to work all my life and die, broke, and the last Social Security check gets canceled by the government because they found out I died a week before they put the check in the mail. Here's what I think would really dramatically empower the America Firsters. If we made Social Security private, if we in some way, somehow made it a transferable asset. In other words, someone who starts work at the age of 25 works for 40 years until they reach the age of 65. And I looked at some numbers today, and I'll round off. I don't want to get into great specificity or detail, but the average household in America today is making somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000. Individual income's about 52, 53. Both parents are normally working. So I'm going to illustrate or give an example in a home where both parents are, bringing home a paycheck. So you've got one making about 60, another making about 40. You got both making 50. You got one making 70, one making 30. However you get to that number, the average house in America today is bringing, and I'm talking about gross income of somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000. Of that $100,000 household income, you're being taxed at about 6.2% on your end and about 6.2% on your employer's end. There's a match there. So about 12.4% of $100,000 is kind of in the kitty. You put 6.2%, your employer matches that with 6.2%, and somewhere out there in the bureaucratic ether, Al Gore said lockbox. There is no lockbox. There is no money. It's money in and money out, and Social Security will soon become solvent. But in the benefit of America Firsters, what if we took that $100,000 a year income and we allowed that 12.4% to be placed in an investment account that the worker has control over? And if you really do the math, guys, let's round off. But let's say $100,000 household income, two parents working, and let's say we're putting up about $1,000 a month. That's $12,000 a year. If you begin work at 25, and we play around with work before we turn 25. Some get it a little quicker and sooner than others. Some go to college, some don't. Some go to trade school, vocation. Some make a lot of money coming out of college. Some struggle for a long time before they find their place, hit their stride, and make a decent amount of money to provide somewhat of a quality of life for their family. But let's go to the $100,000, and let's say 12% does not go to the federal government. In other words, the employer sends 6.2% to an investment manager of your choice. You take 6.2% and you direct that to an investment management company of your choice. And I went back and looked at some of the historical data. in the safest way, you could average about 7% in return. So if you begin work at 25, you work until you're 65, that's 40 years. Now, I would imagine at the beginning of one's work life, you don't make 100. At the end of one's work life, you probably make better than 100. But for argument's sake, I'm going on some of the national average as we speak. But imagine working from the age of 25 until the age of 65. Imagine you and your wife, you and your husband making about $100,000 a year, and you go to the mailbox and you wait on a $1,700 a month check. You're at the mercy of the federal government. They're in charge. Will it be solvent? Will it be insolvent? Will I get cut 25%? They have mismanaged the Social Security Trust Fund in a way that I think they should be not allowed to make some of the investments for working class Americans. But in the spirit of America First, if you took $12,000 a year, put it in an investment account, and it made 7% interest, does anybody have any idea what sort of nest egg you would have at the age of 65? You would have paid in $480,000. I did the math. You would have paid in, between you and your employer, $480,000. If over the course of 40 years that money made you 7% interest, you would have $2.471 million. Let me say that again. Not a check for $1,767 every month, waiting on the government to give you some sort of benefit. Instead, you would have a transferable asset that you can leave to your kids, your grandkids, your dog, your grandma, your grandfather, your girlfriend, your two girlfriends, your mate, whomever you choose. You've got a nest egg created because you worked your ass off for 40 years. And your employer considered you a good employer, and you took 6.2% of your money. That employer matched it with 6.2% of their money. You put $1,000 a month for 40 years, and at the end of the rainbow is not a government-sponsored payment of $1,767, but rather $2.471 million that you can leave to whomever you choose to leave that to. That is transformational in the American working class. That is financial empowerment. That is financial independence. Now, I could be one of these cynical conspiracy theorists and say, well, the last thing the American government wants is a financially empowered middle class America. Okay. I mean, I'll save that for another day. But if we want to really put some intellectual underpinning to America First, and if America First is a movement largely dominated not by conservatism, not by liberalism, but rather working class Americans who don't believe the system has treated them as well as they deserve to be treated, what if you didn't get a $1,767 check from the government every month, but rather had $2.471 million in an investment account that belongs to you? That, my friends, is a policy that would advantage the American working class. I want to really, I don't want to require you, I don't want to insist of you. I want to encourage you to go to our YouTube page, subscribe, like us. We're new at this. I'm somewhat mouthy, but I'm digitally illiterate. I don't know how these algorithms work. I don't know how you get views and subscribers, but we're kind of a newbie at this. We've been fairly successful in the radio, but we understand radio. If you like what we talk about here, some are interviews, some are me and my big mouth and my political opinions. But if you like what we do here, we would strongly encourage you, almost plead with you to subscribe, to like us. It helps us get out there, helps our message become a little more mainstream. And none of this would be possible without our sponsors: Francis Marion University, Carolina Bank, Micky Fins, Victor's, Marlboro MPD Electric, McCall Farms, Pepsi, Florence PLC Commercial Real Estate, and McLeod Health. Thanks to them, and thanks very much to you.